Exploring the wild has always carried a silent risk. Mountains, rivers, and open skies can offer freedom, but they can also take lives in sudden, brutal ways. In this video, we'll uncover 5 more real stories of outdoor adventures that ended in the most disturbing deaths. Each case shows how quickly thrill can turn to terror when nature strikes back. It was September 14, 2004, in the wilderness of Yukon, Canada. A float plane circled over Reed Lakes on the southern slope of the Selwyn Mountains and touched down on the water. This place was isolated, about 175 miles north of Whitehorse, with the nearest settlement, Stewart Crossing, 15 miles away. Few people came here, except seasoned hunters or wildlife experts. The passenger that day was 49-year-old Bart Schleyer. He had come for a 2-week solo expedition. He never returned. Bart wasn't an ordinary outdoorsman. He was a wildlife biologist, hunter, and survival expert who had spent decades in remote regions. Born in 1955 in Cheyenne, Wyoming, Bart was the son of Dr. Otis Schleyer, a physician and hunter. At 10 years old, he joined his father on safari in Mozambique, an experience that shaped his fascination with wildlife. As a child, Bart studied animals, drew them, and read about their behavior. His sister Claudia remembered how much he wanted to understand every detail about how they lived. In 1979, he earned a master's degree in wildlife biology from Montana State University. One of his professors said he stood out among more than 40,000 students for his deep knowledge of animals and ecosystems. Bart worked with the Grizzly Bear Recovery Project in Yellowstone, capturing and tagging grizzlies with radio collars. He later traveled to Russia, where he studied endangered Siberian tigers. There, he had a partner named Tanya Perova, and together they had a son, Artyom. Bart was also passionate about hunting, often using bows and arrows he built himself. He spent months alone in the wild, thriving in conditions that would overwhelm most. In September 2004, Bart packed 3 large containers of food, a tent, clothing, and an inflatable boat. The float plane dropped him at Reed Lakes on September 14th. 2 weeks later, when the pilot returned, Bart was gone. His gear remained, but there was no sign of him. He was reported missing on September 30th. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police, RCMP, searched the area. They found food remains and his inflatable boat about half a mile from camp. They guessed he had tried walking toward the highway, but worsening weather ended the search. A close friend, Dib Williams, refused to accept that. With pilot Wayne Curry, he flew back. They discovered Bart's tent collapsed with all his gear, backpack, bear spray, knife, and radio still inside. They knew Bart wouldn't leave those behind. The next day, they found his bow leaning against a spruce tree, a handmade quiver with arrows, and a dry bag. It looked like Bart had been calling for moose. Then came something troubling, a camouflage face mask with traces of blood and hair. They called the RCMP back. On October 3rd, a new search began. First, they saw animal tracks from bears and wolves. Then they found scattered items: pants, a cap, a camera, and part of a human skull. Dental records confirmed the remains belonged to Bart. Evidence pointed to grisly activity. The RCMP believed Bart had been attacked, comparing it to the well-known case of Timothy Treadwell in Alaska. But Bart's friends disagreed. They argued a bear couldn't sneak up on someone so skilled. His clothing showed almost no damage, and the skull lacked bite or claw marks. His food containers hadn't been touched either, something experts said a bear would normally raid. Some suggested wolves, though the evidence didn't fit. Others thought he may have suffered a sudden medical emergency, leaving his body exposed to scavengers. A few quietly suspected foul play, perhaps linked to his time in Russia, though there was no proof. Bart was one of the most skilled wilderness experts of his time. But in September 2004, something happened that even he couldn't survive. The RCMP still lists the case as open. To this day, the disappearance and death of Bart Schleyer remain one of the most unsettling mysteries in the Canadian wilderness. It was June 9, 2025, in the remote Fraktos forest of northeastern Greece. 61-year-old Christos Stavrianidis, an experienced hiker, was there with his close friend, Dimitris Kyoroglu. They weren't just hiking for leisure. Christos had discovered something unusual the year before: the wreck of a World War II Greek warplane, hidden deep in the forest and still nearly intact after more than 70 years. He saw it as a rare piece of history, and wanted to chart a safe route for others to reach it. Both men were skilled outdoorsmen. They knew the rugged terrain and carried pepper spray in case of danger. They even brought a dog for added protection. On paper, they were prepared. But preparation didn't stop what came next. As they moved deeper into the Rhodope Mountains, Christos began filming with his phone. At first, the video showed calm landscapes. Then he spotted something, a large brown bear. He called out to Dimitris to bring the spray. Seconds later, the bear appeared in frame. The dog charged toward it, barking and snapping. This gave Dimitris time to use his pepper spray, forcing the bear to retreat briefly. But instead of leaving, it turned its focus to Christos, who was standing dangerously close to a cliff. His own spray was already used up. According to Dimitris, the bear advanced quickly. In a sudden rush, it pushed Christos off balance. With no chance to grab hold, Christos fell into a ravine, a drop of more than 2,600 feet. Dimitris climbed a tree for safety and called rescuers. Teams arrived, finding broken branches, paw prints, and Christos's phone with its video still intact. At the bottom of the ravine, they found his body. He had not survived the fall. The forensic report confirmed no bites or claw wounds. Christos's injuries matched those from a high fall, fractures in his spine and ribs, massive internal bleeding, and a ruptured spinal cord. He died instantly on impact. Wildlife group Arcturus later explained that Greek brown bears are not normally aggressive. This one most likely acted out of fear, seeing the men and dog as a threat. Instead of attacking, it tried to push back, which ended fatally because of Christos's position near the cliff. Some rescuers suggested the dog may have unintentionally triggered the bear's return. After the spray, the animal appeared to be moving away, but when the dog lunged again, it may have startled it into rushing back toward Christos. Authorities reviewed the recovered video. It showed Christos filming calmly, then calling out to Dimitris. They could hear the barking, the spray being used, and the bear's growl before the phone abruptly cut off, likely as Christos fell. The investigation is still open. The phone was sent for further study, but evidence supports Dimitris's account. The bear's movement caused the fatal fall. Christos's funeral was held days later in Drama, Greece. His wife, 3 children, friends, and fellow hikers attended. For many, it was hard to believe. He had set out to share a hidden piece of history and never returned. In Greece, only about 450 to 500 brown bears remain, mostly in the Rhodope and Pindos Mountains. They are a protected species and rarely approach humans. Still, encounters do happen. Earlier this year in India, a father and son lost their lives to a sloth bear. Similar incidents have been reported in Slovenia and Slovakia as populations grow. Christos's death was not from a traditional animal attack. The bear didn't hunt him. It reacted defensively in a tense moment: a man, a dog, pepper spray, and a cliff. In seconds, everything changed. It was May 21st, 2025, in Scottsdale, Arizona. The temperature had reached 102 degrees Fahrenheit. That afternoon, 31-year-old Hannah Moody parked her car at the gateway trailhead of the McDowell-Sonoran Preserve just outside Phoenix. She was about to start a hike, something she had done many times before. Hannah was well known online with more than 44,000 Instagram followers. She often shared her hikes, her Christian faith, and her reflections on life. Recently, she had started a series called Hikes with Han, where she talked about faith, fitness, and finding joy outdoors. Just days earlier, she posted about how thankful she was to explore Arizona's mountains again. But this hike would be her last. Hannah had plans to meet friends later that evening. When she never showed up and didn't answer messages, they knew something was wrong. At 7:50 p.m., she was reported missing. Police arrived at the trailhead and found her car still parked. A search began immediately. Officers on foot and bikes entered the desert, drones were sent up, and Phoenix police assisted with a helicopter. After more than 4 hours, the search was paused at 11:30 p.m. due to darkness. At first light the next day, more than 20 officers, along with the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, resumed the search. Just after noon, a helicopter spotted a body about 600 yards off trail from the parking lot. It was Hannah. She had been found only 550 meters from the trail, but in an area with no shade and harsh exposure. Investigators believe she may have left the trail to rest or attempt a shortcut. Temperatures had become dangerously high, and she was alone. The Maricopa County medical examiner determined she died from heat exposure. Her death was ruled accidental. Her body showed early signs of decomposition and some abrasions, likely from falling while disoriented and dehydrated. Toxicology tests came back negative for alcohol, medication, or recreational substances. There were no signs of struggle or external harm. Her family was devastated. Her mother, Terry Moody, told reporters, "We're trying to piece it all together. We don't know of any health conditions that could have caused anything." Later, she added, "I hope she didn't suffer. I hope she wasn't aware. It was preventable. That's the hard part." Authorities said there were no signs she had tried to call for help. She was close to the parking lot, but in the desert, every step matters. Her friend, Megan Pasquale, described her as someone who went out of her way to brighten a stranger's day. To honor her, Megan organized a sunrise hike on May 31st, which would have been Hannah's 32nd birthday. Hannah's life before hiking was just as unique. For nearly a decade, she worked as a dancer. Leaving that world was difficult, but she found strength in bodybuilding and her faith. Between 2015 and 2018, she competed in 5 amateur bodybuilding events, even placing 5th nationally. Fitness became her outlet, but her faith became her foundation. She often wrote about trusting in God and surrendering control. In one of her last videos, she spoke about being grateful for her new restaurant job's day shift. It gave her more time for sunset hikes, something she saw as a blessing. Days later, she took her final hike. Her death shocked many. She was experienced, careful, and strong, but heat exhaustion does not spare anyone. In extreme temperatures, even the most skilled hikers can quickly become disoriented. Months later, her family posted a final message to her Instagram. She died doing what she adored, hiking the Arizona mountains. Know that you were all precious and loved by her. We miss Hannah terribly, but we know she is in a place so beautiful that this earth pales in comparison. Hannah Moody was more than an influencer. She was a daughter, sister, and friend who inspired thousands. She loved the desert, her faith, and her community. But the Arizona heat proved stronger, and her hike on May 21st was the last one she would ever take. It was April 3, 2006 in Le Grave, France. Doug Coombs, a 48-year-old extreme skier from the United States, was on the slopes with friends. They were in one of the most dangerous areas in the French Alps, the Couloir de Polichinelle. Doug had skied it many times before. Steep, icy, and full of risk, this kind of terrain was normal for him. But that day would be his last. Doug wasn't just another skier. Born September 24, 1957 in Boston and raised in Bedford, Massachusetts, he started skiing in New Hampshire and Vermont before heading to Montana State University. There, he trained at Bridger Bowl and later became a leading figure in Jackson Hole, Wyoming's extreme skiing scene. In the early 1990s, Doug made history. He co-founded Valdez Heliski Guides in Alaska, one of the first helicopter skiing companies. He won the World Extreme Skiing Championship in both 1991 and 1993. But what mattered most to him wasn't winning, it was the mountains. In 1992, Doug married Emily Gladstone. Together, they created Doug Coombs Steep Skiing Camps worldwide. By 1997, they had moved the business to Europe, focusing on Le Grave and Chamonix. The couple also had a son, David. Le Grave became Doug's second home. It was unlike other ski resorts. No groomed runs, no ski patrol, no avalanche control. The cable car brought skiers over 3,000 meters up, where cliffs, glaciers, and narrow chutes defined the landscape. It was raw, and Doug thrived in it. That day, Doug skied alongside friend Chad Vanderham, a mountain guide in training. They chose the Couloir de Polichinelle, a slope of 50 to 55 degrees. On such terrain, mistakes weren't allowed. As they descended, Chad slipped. He lost control and began to fall. Doug reacted instantly, moving to reach him. But in the process, he too slipped. Whether from unstable snow or a missed step, no one knows for sure. Both men fell about 1,500 feet down the couloir. Rescue teams rushed in. Doug was gone on impact. Chad survived the fall, but later passed away in the hospital. Doug's death shocked the skiing community. He had mentored countless skiers and pushed the sport forward. To lose him in Le Grave, a mountain he knew so well, felt unreal. Debates soon followed. Some argued that Le Grave's lack of safety measures was irresponsible. Others said that was exactly the point. It was about freedom. about adapting to the mountain instead of changing it. Doug himself had once lost skiing privileges in Jackson Hole for crossing boundaries in search of harder terrain. For him, risk was part of skiing. Even so, questions remained. Doug was known for careful techniques, like pedal turns and pole plants to stay steady on steep slopes. Yet even skill couldn't save him that day. In the years since, LaGrave has seen more accidents, including avalanches that claimed lives. Guides tell stories of skiers nearly falling off cliffs, saved only by chance. 10 years later, in 2016, close friends held a private memorial. They placed plaques near the site to honor Doug and Chad. Doug's legacy also lives on through Coombs Outdoors, a nonprofit helping children in Jackson, Wyoming experience outdoor sports. Doug was more than a pioneer. He was a husband, father, and mentor. But what happened that day in LaGrave showed how unforgiving the mountains can be. Even the best are never safe from one wrong step. It was July 19, 2025, in Yosemite National Park, California. Angela Lin, a 29-year-old software engineer at Google, was on a weekend hike with her boyfriend, David Hua, and two close friends. They were walking through Tuolumne Grove, a well-known trail lined with massive sequoia trees. It was meant to be a calm, relaxing trip outdoors. The group stopped often, taking in the view of the towering trees. But in a few seconds, everything changed. Angela was always careful. She followed rules, stayed on marked paths, and avoided risky behavior. The weather was clear, no rain, no wind. Nothing seemed unusual. But what happened next was something no one could have predicted. As they stood near the trees, the group suddenly heard a loud, sharp crack from above. David said it was only 2 or 3 seconds from the sound to when disaster struck. Large branches began crashing down. One massive branch struck Angela directly. David recalled closing his eyes as the branches fell, then opening them to see Angela lying face up on the ground. Blood was pooling around her head. She wasn't moving. He immediately called 911 and began CPR until a ranger arrived. An ambulance was dispatched, but paramedics said Angela most likely passed away the moment the branch hit her. The impact caused severe head injuries. She never left the trail. At 5:50 p.m., the Tuolumne County Sheriff's Office received the call and later confirmed Angela's passing as accidental, caused by blunt injuries. Her body was taken from the scene and the trail was closed for a week. Officials have said an investigation is ongoing, but no details have been released about why the branch fell. Angela's boyfriend has since spoken publicly, saying the Park Service has provided little information. Out of frustration, he reached out to the media, asking for answers on trail safety, maintenance, and how to prevent this from happening again. The loss has left Angela's family and David devastated. David said it felt impossible to process because Angela wasn't doing anything dangerous. She was just standing there, looking at a tree. A tourist nearby later wrote on Reddit about what they saw, saying the memory has haunted them since. They described the scene as tragic and disturbing, adding, "They were doing nothing wrong. Life can be so cruel." Angela's background showed how much she had accomplished. She graduated from UC Berkeley in 2017 with a degree in electrical engineering and computer science, then earned her master's in computer science from the University of Texas at Austin in 2019. She worked at Salesforce before joining Google in 2022, based in the Bay Area. Her colleagues remembered her as bright and kind. Ian Cook, who met her at Berkeley, said she had a way of making others feel at ease. Richard Zhang, who worked with her as a student, recalled her staying late to help finish projects and even bringing chocolate to lift spirits. A Google spokesperson later confirmed her death, saying, "We lost a respected member of our team. Our hearts are with her family and loved ones." Outside of work, Angela loved swing dancing, singing, and spending time outdoors. That made the accident even harder for her loved ones to accept. She passed away doing something she truly enjoyed. Angela and David had known each other since college. He described her as one of the most cautious people he had ever met. That made her sudden death even more difficult to understand. Sadly, Yosemite has seen similar incidents. In 2012, a worker died when a tree collapsed on his tent during a storm. In 2015, 2 students sleeping in a tent were struck by a falling oak branch. In 2024, a hiker named Harry Partington lost his life when a tree fell on the 4-mile trail. But Angela's case was different. There was no storm, no strong wind, no warning. Even now, the investigation has offered no clear answers. Was the tree unstable? Could it have been prevented? Until the findings are released, her family and friends remain in grief and uncertainty. Angela Lynn was 29 years old. She had a bright future, a loving relationship, and a strong community around her. She wasn't taking risks. She was simply on a hike. In one silent moment, with no warning, her life was gone.